Is there anybody there?
The first game I ever remember going to. We all remember our first game, hopefully, or something very early in our sports and particularly baseball experience. My first baseball experience that I can remember was going to a game with my family, and it was Roberto Clemente night at Shea Stadium.
What's up, Dad Hat Crew? Ed here, and on this episode, I give you guys the one and only Todd Radom. That's right. He was gracious enough to come on my podcast. It was awesome because we had a lot of fun about talking baseball, design, his book, ugly uniforms. That's right. Listen, there have been some really ugly uniforms throughout the year. There have been some ugly uniforms in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Yeah. All of them, every single sport, they all have at least one team with an ugly uniform. We talked about that, his process on when he designs, how he goes about it, and then we also talk about a wonderful logo, the Wichita Wind Surge. That's right, Eric. We talked about that one. So, without further ado, guys, I give you the episode. Welcome back, guys, to yet another episode of the Dad Hat Chronicles. Obviously, you guys know I say this every time. My name is Ed, but guys, today I have a treat for you guys. I'm super excited. Once you guys know who this person is, you'll know he has been around for a while and he's done some amazing work. My favorite one so far is the Wind Surge, which is Todd Wind Surge. The man, the one and only Todd Radom. How are you today, my friend?
Ed, thank you so much. Great to see you. Happy almost holiday weekend, but I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, right. We'll take care of this, and then we'll go in and enjoy the weekend and have some fun. How's that?
It sounds good to me. It's a good start to it all.
I like it. All right. So let's dive in, my friend. I usually ask, why you become a fan of sports? Because you do a lot of work, all over the sport, spectrum, but why sports? What made you gravitate towards that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I've been asked a lot of questions. I'm not sure anybody asked me exactly that. So the beginning of it all, I always say that, combining an interest in sports with what I do for a living is, it used to be really unique. It's not as unique as it used to be, but the short story is I come from a very artistic family. I've always been a sports fan. People who are sports fans usually pick it up when we're young, and that was the case with me. And anyway, the thing about design for sports is the fact that people really care about this stuff, as
just a little,
by the fact, that we're talking here. And in the design community, it used to be that sports was looked upon as kind of the dumpster diving of design. It was not held in high esteem. So to work on things that people really care about, they wear these logos, they are tribal in their interests. People get tattoos of these logos. You know what I'm saying, because we're talking the same language. It turned out to be a great thing to get into because it's so visible, and there's scrutiny attached to it, but the rewards are there as well. People do care about this. So I kind of got into design for sports before there was probably about 3 people doing it at that time, 35 years ago. So here we are.
Here we go, 2023, and you're still, one of the top names out there. So, you must have been doing, you did something right? Like, you picked the right medium to start doing this. So why not, right?
Well, sometimes sometimes the medium chooses you. Sometimes it's luck, being right place, right time. And I'm firmly convinced that, a certain amount of fate was involved in all of this. And here we are. Like I said, all roads lead to this very day. And I do things that don't have to do with sports, but the vast majority of what I do is sports related. And I love it.
That's amazing. Also, you have a great collection of Chuck Taylors. Every time you show them off, I'm like, oh man, this guy is he's a man after my own heart right here. I love it.
You got to have some personal expression, right, Ed? You know it.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let me ask you, and you said something very interesting, right? Because I've always wanted to ask this, as an artist, when you get the accolades, everybody loves you and all that. And you're like, man, you're on cloud 9, right? Like, you're amazing. I love this. How do you deal with, like, let's say someone, like they're like, oh God, this thing is the ugliest logo there has been. How do you deal with like a lot of the rejection side of being an artist?
Well, a couple of things. I'll go way back and think about being in art school. I went to School of Visual Arts in the 1980s, and you would literally sit in a room and have your work critiqued.
Yeah.
And within the word critique is criticism, right? I
Yeah.
mean, so you could look at it two ways. It could be constructive, or it could be a group of people in a circle,
Mhm.
ganging up on you and criticizing you. So it starts there. So I've been doing it for a long time, to say the least, and I've been subjected to that dynamic for a long time as well. But secondly, certainly in today's world where we have this tortured civic conversation, people don't know how to act with each other. People don't,
Mhm.
I actually was talking about this last night with somebody. I am one of these people, particularly on social media, who you measure twice, you cut once, you think about what you're going to say, and then you click that enter or send button. And, we don't have a lot of that. So I kind of come at it from a perspective of the fact, okay, people are just, shooting from the hip over here. They're not thinking about it. And every once in a while, I do want to engage, which I really
Mhm.
try not to, because it's kind of pointless,
Yeah.
usually, not to be condescending.
No, it is.
But
It is pointless.
yeah, I mean, it's point. Like, what are you going to do? It's kind of like I will say, well, listen, there were considerations that played out across a lot of people. It's never a unilateral decision what a designer wants to make, and they're going to make a pretty picture, and boom, it appears, in the form of a team's logo. So I always try to explain it when I do this, that there are a number of stakeholders involved, that it is a methodical process,
Mhm.
that it's not brain surgery. If you cut the brain in the wrong place, the patient's going to die in that case. In this case, there are a lot of shades of gray. And then I come back to the fact that, like, wow, people really do care about it. I mean, that's the big picture thing. And it's believe me, I've heard it all over the years.
Right. You've been dragged through the mud on certain things. They're like, oh, this sucks and this is not great. But and I always try to explain to people. And when I started my podcast, I really started to really understand that, like, there really is not one person a lot of the times that makes a decision on that design. There's like you said, there's a group of people that say, okay, yeah, we like this, but can you tweak this and can you tweak that? And at the end, you have the end result, and some people are going to like it, and then some people are not going to. So far, I have not really seen that many things that I have not liked, as you can see from the wall behind me.
Yeah, exactly. And you're a positive guy.
You have to, right? Especially like you said, like, social media can become a really dark place really quick if you're not really, if you let it get to you, in those areas. So
Well, and really, to that point, there are two sides to sports design. Of course, there are
of
the
course.
hardcore fans who are fans of teams, who are live and die with their teams every day, and then there are people who are into fashion and love logos, and I mean, that's gotten bigger and bigger, particularly over the last few years,
Hmm.
as some of the looks of our headwear. I'm looking behind you. I have a bunch of, you could be really a purist about this stuff. But anyway, the point is that there's a broad cross section of humanity who is interested in this stuff, whatever the
Yeah.
case. So,
Oh,
you gotta, and anyway, getting back to something you said just a minute ago, there is, there is always a slew of people who are involved in this process, and sometimes it's an enormous group of people. And I always liken it to that old expression about the sausage being made. It's not pretty, but hopefully at the end of the process it's tasty.
yeah. And great analogy. That's amazing.
It's
That's a good analogy
I've
right
used
there.
it once or twice, and I'm understating that. I've used it hundreds of times because
Yeah.
it's true, and I've lived through it. So
Exactly.
it's a meat grinder. It really can be.
Yeah, most certainly can. Let me ask you, and obviously you've been asked this 1,000 times, so I do apologize. But, like, I want to get into your process. You have a process, just like every artist has a process of design, right? I'm sure there are those initial conversations when someone reaches out to you and say, "Hey, this is what we want to do," and then you'll start having those conversations. But, like, what is that process like for you, as Todd, the designer?
Well, I mean, every job to me starts with me asking whoever is in charge of this, why?
Mhm.
Why are you doing this? What is the point of this? Sometimes it's change for change's sake, but more often than not, when we're talking about some big team rebrand, for
Mhm.
example, teams rebrand for one of several very defined reasons. A team may have changed hands. They might have new ownership, and that new owner might want to impart their own
Their own
feel
stamp on
onto
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a team might want to break a cycle of losing. This happens very, very frequently. Sometimes a team will move into a new stadium or arena, and this provides a great opportunity to kind of, get a new set of clothes and, buy some new furniture. Look at it that way, right? It's all
Yeah.
part of that. So you start with why, and then every job really starts with a very disciplined research process. So we never jump right into, or I never jump right into putting quote unquote pen to paper.
Mhm.
I want to know why you're doing this. I want to know who your fan base is. I want to know what makes a fan of a team in Kansas City different from a fan of a team in Vancouver or New York or Miami. And, I've got preconceived notions about this, but sometimes you'll find out some surprising things that you never knew. And there are some fan bases in some cities that are more traditional. If I were going to be asked tomorrow to redesign the Boston Red Sox, which I'm not being asked to do, or the New York Yankees, the Detroit Tigers, you're going to approach that in a very different way than you might the Arizona Diamondbacks or Phoenix Arizona Coyotes or whoever it might be.
And
So
what ends up being on that section because I don't even have a stadium, a place to put it
yeah,
at right now.
exactly. That's why that's what brought it to mind. And I'm like, okay, where are they going to be? So
Right.
anyway, it's it starts with research and knowing what you're getting into, and then among a part of this is making sure that you're not infringing upon someone else's look. If you were to give me the Boston College Eagles, well, I would surely have to look at the Philadelphia Eagles. I would have to look at every bird team out there. I would have to look at teams that are in Boston. So there's a lot of this stuff that goes into it. And then comes the fun part. I mean, the research is fun. I really enjoy it.
Mhm.
Not everybody does, but I really do. And then you kind of get into it. And to really just kind of like sew it up, there are, you go in with a series of very well defined concepts that are based on this empirical evidence that you've gathered up. And then comes the sausage process.
The ugly part here comes, like the
Yeah.
design part.
Yeah, and get ready because the fun stuff is all front ended, and just navigating that process is a thing. And you've got to be able to see it through it. It's a marathon. Basically, you can't lose steam at mile 40 or 24, and you got to go, run through the tape with vigor and enthusiasm.
Mhm.
And then you've got to wait because there's always a period where it takes a little while for it to actually get out there.
You're like, all right, so here's like, we just finished it. Everything has been approved. We're good to go. Now hurry up and wait.
Yeah, yeah, and a good example of that is a very special logo that I did. I won't even allude to what it is, but it's for a team, and it was finished well over a year ago in anticipation of 2024. And you almost forget about this,
Oh my
and
God.
they're probably going to be releasing it soon. And I'm like, yeah, that's going to be kind of fun to see that. And I look back at what it was because, again, you kind of like your brain after a year of not really having looked at it. And I can't wait to see what people say about it because I think that they're going to enjoy it.
I am so excited. I'm pumped. I don't know what it is, but I'm pumped because like I've seen some of your work already. Like, I mean, like I said, you've done some amazing work. And actually one of my favorite logos, and if I may say so, is like the rework that you did for the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved continually with World Baseball Classic since before it was a thing, which is to
Oh,
say that started out discussions, I totally remember, over a lunch in 2004 at the All-Star game in Houston in anticipation of the 2006 inaugural WBC. And of course, all these years later, on the back, of what we just witnessed with this tournament, where it really kind of hit its stride and came to fruition in a way that everyone imagined it would have come to fruition way back when. It was this buildup. But I was there for the first finals, Japan versus Cuba in San Diego in 2006. And I love it. And it's so wonderful to see people all over the world embrace this thing, knowing that I've been a small part of it since the very beginning.
Listen, as someone who supports and is from, Puerto Rico, the fact that, like, a tournament such as this has been, put fandom right in the
Yeah.
forefront. That's what it is. Like, you see, is like the excitement and the players buying in. It was an absolute just humongous success, at least for me, from my point of view. Was like, seeing fans really engage into this tournament. So
Yeah, certainly. And Puerto Rico's going to win at one of these tournaments. I
they
mean,
better win it one of these years.
there's
My
too much
God,
talent on that little island there,
Jesus.
and baseball history and all of it. But yeah, I mean, again, I was just in Korea a couple of weeks ago too, and had the opportunity to go to a Korean professional game. So this sport that is so familiar to you and I and millions of other people, when you see something that's different about it, when it's played with a different kind of style. I mean, a good example I always talk about is the fact that I went to Cuba in the late 90s on a project. I had a permit from the U.S. Treasury Department, so it was all completely legal. It's a hard place to get to, obviously.
Yeah.
But to just watch a Cuban professional game at that time and see these guys warming up in the infield, throwing balls back and forth like darts.
Oh.
No lazy throws from third to first.
No, like we're like, no, if we're gonna practice, we're gonna practice like we're playing in the
Yeah,
game.
yeah. And maybe even a little more. It's like 120% of capacity. So there is that there's a word for it, like verdugo, or like, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's like elan, some
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
it's really it is absolutely awesome. So anyway, to have that kind of an opportunity to work within the game on something that's a little bit different and global in reach, very, very, very cool thing. I hold the WBC very close to my heart.
I hold it close to my heart, like, on our flags. How we Puerto Ricans are. We put our flag on every single thing
Oh
we can
yeah.
think of. So the fact that you saw it, and you saw the pride of like these other countries, and the fact that like you got to see the game from different countries' aspects point of view, right? Like, it was because U.S. we played, they play different here in the U.S. and we do in Puerto Rico and Korea and China. So it's like very different, and it's like very entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's all about preconceived notions to me. You
Mhm.
could get lazy, all of us, thinking that we know things that because we've seen things
Right.
however long we've been around for. And every once in a while, you see something that jolts you into, paying attention to some degree, a little bit
Yeah.
more. And that would be the case with international baseball. And hey, I grew up in New York, so Puerto Rican community and the Puerto Rican baseball community is a force to be reckoned with for sure.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that flag and like boom, there it is.
There it
So
is. There, you can't miss it. It's gonna be there.
yeah, and along those lines, I don't want to like veer us off course necessarily, but I always say that like one of the things about getting older is, okay, there are parts of it which aren't necessarily great, but one of the things that is great is I'm of an age that the first game I ever remember going to, we all remember our first game,
Mhm.
hopefully, or something very early in our
Yep.
sports and particularly baseball experience. My first baseball experience that I can remember was going to a game with my family, and it was Roberto Clemente night at Shea Stadium in
Oh,
1971, where the Puerto Rican community of New York
whoa.
honored the great one. And so there was a Cadillac driven around the warning track to home plate. He was presented with a check for some charitable endeavors that, he was involved with so many of them. And then he gets the game-winning hit. And, I remember it distinctly. I was 7 years old. And I remember thinking like, wow, this guy's got to be pretty important to giving him this big car. And of course, we know how the story ends.
Yeah.
But to have been able to see him perform in person on that particular night was pretty special and very amazing.
And what could have been that career?
Yeah.
What could have been, right? Oh,
Well,
just cut.
he had a very long and fruitful career, and he was
He
getting toward
did.
the end, but he probably had another 2, 3 years in the tank. He hits 3,000 hits on the nose. I actually just did a piece of art which is on display at PNC Park in Pittsburgh, commemorating his 3,000th hit. It's kind of
Mm.
a Puerto Rican, Latin American influenced poster of the
No.
70s with the Puerto Rican flag, and he's there in profile, embodying all of that dignity. But think about what he could have done as a human being after his baseball career. As
Yep.
much as he did, he had an entire lifetime ahead of him, of good work and good deeds. And, I know how fondly he's remembered every single day now, all 50 years later.
And that's my point, right? Like, I mean, yes, granted, he did amazing, work on the field, but my thing is like, what could have been like as far as the off the field, right? Like, the humanitarian work that he did, like, bringing pride to like, a country such as ours, in Puerto Rico, even here in the US, right? So that's like, that's what I was like, that life got cut short.
Yeah.
However, because of that, though, there has been a lot of work, because of, he's still, it's 2023 and he's still inspiring people.
Yeah.
That's how crazy it is.
That's it. I mean, it's a legacy, and I know that there have actually been serious conversations. It's not anything to laugh at, of him basically being nominated for sainthood, right?
Yeah.
Nobody is perfect, but you think about the life, the impact of that very short life, and of course, you cannot escape the way that he perished in service to others. And anyway, a mighty legacy. So to have done this piece of artwork, to have done a couple of other
That's
things
awesome
involving him, and to again remember that first ever game that I remember. It's inspiring, and very cool.
I love it. So let's go back a little bit to design, because I really wanted to get a couple questions here. Do you look, when you are doing the design, when you're doing the whole process of everything, do you look at how that logo would look, on example, like on a 5950 or a Dad Hat or whatever? Like, do you is that something that you really look at and think about to make sure that it actually is aesthetically pleasing on a hat?
Yeah, I mean, so we call it activation, Ed. So how does something activate? And particularly in 2023 and beyond, things have to activate in ways that we never had to think about as designers 20, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, because technology changes so quickly. I always joke about the fact that, hey, when I started out, the big criteria was, what will it look like in black and white on a fax cover sheet, right? and there are some people who are listening to this who have no idea what a fax machine is, or can't even whatever. But we will always portray what it looks like in, if it's a baseball logo, maybe in, on the field of play in the context of an on-deck circle, ribbon boards, embroidery. Things get big, things get small. They've got to be avatars. We're looking at things in our phones, which are teeny, teeny, tiny. We're looking at graphics, getting gigantic. We're looking at graphics, which are, in the case of social media, which we talked about earlier, a score bug or some kind of something that's fleeting, that's going to, the logo has to be really small and next to a number or some other messaging. So it's different than it used to be, but and it's challenging. But yes, we do portray how all this stuff plays out when it hits the real world.
It's so wild. Like, obviously, and like you said, it's like there's so many people now, they're like, are fan of the sport. Yes. However, we look at collectors, right? Like, how many people have thousands of hats? I mean, I'm nowhere near being 1,000 hats, but like I have my own, collection. It's like, I look at those logos and I'm like, man, that really looks great on that, with that color. That looks great with the brim, with the, with the button on the top and all of that, the green under the bottom of the brim and things like that. Like, to think about all of that, it's just, that is one of the coolest things, as a job, right? That's, to me, that's amazing. You guys are killing it with that. I love that.
Well, and that's a relatively recent thing, as you know, the influence and the size and the enthusiasm of what I'll call, and everybody calls, that knows about it, the hat community, has just blown up, particularly, since the pandemic, right? I mean, I think there were a lot of people who were home and decided to, match their kicks and their hats and drips and all of it. Yeah, and it's really liberating. It's a great. I love. We've all got our go-tos, but and hats are great because not everybody can wear an all orange outfit, let's say, but you can wear an orange hat or a powder blue hat or a neon green hat that I see behind you.
Yep.
And match it with your sneakers or not.
Absolutely.
And it's, like I said earlier, a little bit of personal expression, and and it's liberating. And of course, there's the great story behind that. Spike Lee, 1996 World Series, asks New Era for a red Yankees hat to match his puffer coat while he's sitting at the World Series in Atlanta, and the rest is history. It's popular culture combined with street culture, streetwear, licensing, and what's worn on the field for this very tasty mix.
That's an interesting question, comment. Like culture, right? Like, popular, pop culture has really woven itself into sports, that like you really cannot have a design without really thinking about how it is going to affect, pop culture and society going forward.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been this way for a long time.
Yeah.
Think about the early days of particularly West Coast rap, where you got,
Hmm.
Dr. Dre and Eazy-E wearing White Sox hats,
Yep.
right? And just, it's a good look. It tracks the Raiders, who were in LA at that point, of course. And, it influenced so many things. But yeah, I mean, it's always, listen, every once in a while you'll see, courtside in an NBA game, celebs wearing maybe an unlikely hat combination, or an unlikely hat and logo combination. You're like, where is this coming from? And people talk about it. And anyway, it drives revenue for people who manufacture this stuff, and keeps all of it interesting for people like you and I.
Yeah, exactly. Keeps it fun. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm gonna go buy a hat today. Here we go. I like that hat. I don't know where it is, which I did.
It's
It
an
happened to me.
addiction. It's totally addictive.
It really is. It literally happened to me. I was watching a baseball game. It was a Guardians. Obviously, that's my team that I follow. But it was a hat that was like a blue with the red brim with the C on it, and I'm like, I couldn't find it anywhere online. I literally the next day called the team and I'm like, listen, I saw this hat on TV. Do you have it available? And sure enough, I was like, oh yeah, we have it. I was like, here's my credit card. Send it to me right now. It literally happened.
And how many Guardians hats do you have?
Well over 30. Well over
Okay,
30.
well there you go. I mean, so like you could potentially like cycle them if you were just going to do that. Cycle through them once a day, every month, and that's a lot of looks.
Yeah. Exactly. It's the same thing here with like the hats that I have. Like I have enough to last me. I can wear one for a day for a year straight and not wear the same one.
It's amazing. It's
really
amazing. And you wouldn't have been able to say that not too long ago. And so again, there's a
No.
range of opportunity for expression as either a fan or somebody who likes logos or is just into fashion. There's something for everybody. So it's very inclusive and cool.
Right. And honestly, to me, it started like, during the pandemic, like you said, it's like, I'm going to support minor league baseball because these guys, the way they make their money is on merchandising. So
Yeah.
even if I buy one hat, at least that's something that's going to help them out, one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the, again, using the word expressive, minor league looks on field and off are there's just so much to choose from. So yeah, it's always been great stuff, and it continues to be regardless of what's going on the field in the minors and structurally.
That's a great segue, by the way. So I'm going to ask you, because you did a design for, one of the best logos out there in minor league baseball, the Wind Surge. Like, what was that process with the minor league team? I mean, because it's different, right? It's a totally different style than a lot of minor leagues. What we look at, fun, quirky minor league logos nowadays.
Yeah, and that is really, it begins with the late owner of the Wichita Wind Surge, Lou Schweckheimer. So Lou, who I just can't say enough good things about, I designed a sleeve patch in his memory, and right behind my monitor over here, about 8 inches behind what I'm looking at of you, is a sleeve patch of Lou. So he kind of looks over me every day here. But Lou Schweckheimer, baseball lifer, for people who are not familiar with him, he started out as an intern with the Pawtucket Red Sox. He was a Rhode Island guy, and he worked his way up and basically became the owner of a couple of major league or minor league franchises. And just a delightful, wonderful human being. So I had known him for a long time. He reached out to me. The Wichita Wind Surge were previously the New Orleans Baby Cakes, and they were just not, things were not in New Orleans, were not working out. So he said, we're going to do a look for Wichita. Wichita is the 50th biggest city in America. A little surprising. Talk about doing your research and finding things out that might, you wouldn't have known otherwise. And his concept was, he said, I want to hire somebody who is, essentially a major league designer to do a major league look for a minor league club. This should be solid. You know, we've done silly. We want to do something that is maybe a little more serious in tone. You could look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a process. It was an amazing process. It involved, you know, touring their ballpark as it was under construction, visiting the city for the announcement of the name and colors. And it was a fun process. And there were a lot of pieces to it. And, you know, the sad part is that Lou passed away of COVID in the early days of the pandemic and never got to see his dream come to fruition in terms of just being at a game there and seeing this look on the field. But everything that job was all about, again, starts with Lou, and I love it. It's a good look. The team was recently sold, so we'll see if they stick with it. I have no idea. but I like it. It's very aspirational. It is a Pegasus ascending to the heavens, you know, propelled by, you know, the winds of the plains, and the colors have some symbolism. And anyway, it was a really fun project, and I look back at it very fondly.
I was just going to ask you about the Pegasus, like the meaning behind the Pegasus for the logo, because I mean, like I said, it pops, like the logo pops. It really does. And like you were saying, you know, those are the things that you think about when you are making a design. Like, is it going to portray, you know, very well on a hat, or like you said, on a phone? Like, you know, like we have our small phones. This is what we use every day. It's a computer, supercomputer, right? So
yeah,
how is it going to look in that?
Well, that's it. And you know, as I said before, and you totally get, like, we as consumers, our attention spans are nothing, right? So
right.
If you think about the Windsurge primary logo, which is, you know, the Pegasus ascending, and it's got a W behind it, and it's, you know, it's you could peel those pieces apart and still have something that's proprietary. And when you look at it teeny tiny on your screen, on, you know, and you're going to look at a score bug, as I said before, it's going to look like it should look. And if a logo fails that test, you know, and again, we're talking 2023 and beyond, and this is what we got. It's got to be able to succeed in that context.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Let me ask you. I've asked this one person before, but you as an artist and a designer, do you have a list of like names and designs that, like, you know, that could potentially eventually be used in certain projects in the future? Do you keep a list for yourself?
No. Usually I mean, I've been involved with that stuff many times, but that's usually not my lane. And let's face it, you know, a lot of the projects I work on are existing teams, redos of existing teams,
redesigns, and
so
like that.
and you know, part of the reason, as you well know, and many of your listeners know, for some of the more I don't know, it depends on how you look at it, fun, outrageous, outlandish, you know, whatever you want to call it, names of minor league teams, is because it's hard to secure a trademark. And so when you start combining two unlikely names and you get something really unique, you can run with it. But no, I don't usually maintain that kind of thing. I'll get involved with it, like I said, but not at the top of my of my list.
That's awesome, though. I mean, the fact that you're like, nope, we're gonna go ahead and, like, based on design, and beside, obviously, you know, trademarking has become such a big, huge part of, you know, design now. You cannot do anything as, like, because then you're going to be like, oh, I'm getting sued for this or that because the name or the logo portrays very closely to something else.
Yeah, you got to really be careful with it. And even to the point that there are, you know, small elements that you may be inspired by. Let's say it's the eye of a bird that's depicted on a certain logo. Well, you know, I mean, I'm going to look at that and say, well, you know, this looks way too close to this. I gotta pull back and do something else. So being mindful of that. You know, we all have lawyers in our lives, and some of them we love, and their friends or spouses or whatever they might be. But cease and desist letters are no good for anybody.
Are never fun. Absolutely not. Okay. So is there a particular decade in that inspires your artistic, you know, frame, or like, it's like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Like, is there a specific decade that you're like, this is where a lot of my inspiration comes from?
What a great question. The answer would be sometimes I feel like I'm a time traveler because I'll
Yeah.
borrow from all these things. I kind of love it. I love all that foo-foo 1870s, crazy lettering with, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily built for today, but there are some pieces of that are very, just again, ebullient, expressive, whatever you want to say, that you can
Hmm.
position for today. Art Deco, the 1930s, late 1920s, early 30s, very streamlined, a lot of symmetry, very kind of built for sports logos in a lot of ways. And then, the 50s aesthetic, which is, Sputnik and, all this
Yeah.
boogie looking stuff, kind of cool. And yeah, so being able to borrow all of these things from different eras is something that I like to do. And, one of the projects I've been involved with for years and years is Cooperstown collection for MLB.
Hmm.
And we don't really create theme art anymore, but creating a logo that might stand in for the 1957 Milwaukee Braves or the 55 Dodgers or the 1942 St. Louis Cardinals or the 27 Yankees, building a piece of art that could be applied to merchandise
Right.
that celebrates these teams. That's just not a Yankees logo. Is something I've always done. So there's that research again, research into what these graphics look like
Yeah.
and how to borrow from the best of that and create something original that tips your hat to it.
I love it. I have one last question for you, and then we'll get into the fun part of this work. But I mentioned this early in the beginning of the episode, is you did a work, the book, Winning Ugly. What inspired you to say, I think this would be cool? Obviously it is cool, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But like, what inspired you to say, like, let's put something together in, during this time period where, like, there were some interesting choices in uniforms. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and actually, it is a great story. I'm glad you asked. And like all great stories, it begins at JFK Airport in New York. So, in all seriousness, I'm sitting at JFK Airport in New York at night, waiting to board a flight to Rome, and this is in the spring of 2017. So, sitting there, you sit in the airport lounge, and you're looking at your email one last time before you're going to be trapped in a metal tube for a number of hours,
Yeah,
because I
right.
never look at my phone when I'm flying. But anyway, and I get an email from an editor at the New York Times asking if I would be interested in writing an op-ed, an editorial essay about ugly baseball uniforms and the draw of them. And I thought, wow, this is, first of all, it's the New York Times asking me to write an editorial piece.
Right.
It's like, wow, that's pretty amazing. And of course, the answer is yes. But
Yeah,
then, what do
hell
you say
yeah.
about them? What do you say about them? And I always say that I am a product of the 1970s. I grew up in the New York area in the 1970s. Lived in the city in the 80s. But this was this era where a lot of things are coming together for sports. There are alternate leagues. There's the ABA in basketball and the WHA in hockey, WFL in football. There are expansion teams. The Blue Jays and the Mariners are born at this moment in 1977 in MLB. And uniforms are changing, right? Society is changing. I have a quote in the book from the manager of the Atlanta Braves who says, he says, well, our uniforms are different than they were 3 years ago. He said this in 1972. He says, the clothes I wear are different than they were 3 years ago. So this is a time where look at a picture of the Beatles, for instance, in 1964, and then look what they looked like in 1967. So why should sports not track that?
Right.
And part of it was really ugly. The 70s are the weirdest decade. And it gave birth to all kinds of strange things. And anyway, our sports clothing reflects that. And of course, it's going to be a book because you can really expand upon this in a way that talks about the history of the baseball uniform in general, and then focuses in a loving way on some of those more questionable uniforms.
There were some ugly ones. Let's just there was
Oh yeah, and you know, I say it in there, you know, in Winning Ugly, ugly is in the eye of the beholder.
True.
At one time, I had a pet bulldog, and I'd walk down the street, and I remember people, various people, I've heard this more than once, look at her and say, "She's so ugly, she's beautiful." Now, what does that mean? Right? Ugly
Right.
dogs can be beautiful. Ugly Christmas sweaters can be charming.
The ugly
Ugly
sweaters is a
baseball
popular thing
uniforms.
now too. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah, so there you have it. So there's something to embrace, some meat on the bones, and something to expand upon.
It's so ugly, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's
Like,
so ugly, it's beautiful. And come on, Ed, like people are somewhere, somebody, they may not be saying exactly that, but they're thinking that about the
oh yeah.
1978 San Diego Padres or the famous Houston Astros tequila sunrise uniforms, whatever.
And which is crazy because both of them are like, very popular right now in design in baseball.
Yeah, they don't look like anything else. I had some questions yesterday. As we are recording this, the Denver Nuggets are about to go to the NBA Finals for the first time in their history, and I had a news outfit in Denver interviewing me about the Denver Nuggets, skyline uniforms, 7 colors, looks like Tetris, 1982, right? But like, there's nothing else that looks like that, and you can imitate that. But like, everyone is going to say, anybody who knows about it is going to, oh, that's the Denver. Often imitated, never duplicated.
And then let's not forget the miserable the logo that you put on your Instagram of the Denver Nuggets with the guy with the axe pick and the basketball. I mean,
Maxi Minor.
Yeah, I mean, come on, that's amazing.
Yeah, you'd never do that today. We take ourselves way too seriously, and it's almost like in a very larger sense. I'm not even going to get into it. It's like logos go through focus groups. We can sometimes overthink this. But something as joyous and pure and kind of like poorly drawn as that would never, ever happen today. And there's a charm and organic nature to it that's very refreshing.
You're right. And, I always say this. We as human beings, we like to complicate the bologna sandwich way too much.
It's true. Like I'm one of these people that like, what do you want on your pizza? Just give me a piece of pizza. Like if it's a good piece of pizza, there's nothing better than good ingredients. You can, too many ingredients can spoil the meal. And
100%.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Love it. All right. You know what? I love this conversation. This is great. All right, my friend. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So you go to the ballpark. I usually ask, what's your food and drink of choice? So I'm going to ask you that one, but I also want you to tell me, what is the very first thing you do when you go into a ballpark? Like, what is the very first thing? Do you go to your seat? Do you go to the team store? What is the first thing that you do when you go into a ballpark?
Well, I'll tell you what, Ed, things have changed this year because of the pitch clock and the game has moved so quickly that my strategy has really changed. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend in from out of town a couple of weeks ago. Went to a game, but this is what I've always done. I love to get there really early. Depends on who you're with. Not everybody likes to sit there and watch batting practice. I want to walk around the whole place. I want to get a sense of place, even if I've been there a million times. I want to grab a beer, especially if the weather's nice, and enjoy looking at the grass, looking at, people watching, soaking in some locality if it's possible. So that's the first thing that I will do. I want a good long walk. Give me a half an hour, stretch the legs.
Yeah, because then you're going to sit down because you can't look away.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You got to be focused.
It's true. It's great for TV, not so much for attending. I'll give people that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Just real quick. I went to another game, about 3 weeks ago, and had great seats, went with great friends. We're talking the whole while. And like, all of a sudden it's the 7th inning. It's like, what happened?
Yeah, right. It is. Yeah. Has baseball become a, for you, not just a sporting event, but like a social event?
Oh, without question. Yeah. No question. I mean, it's kind of always been. I have a core group of college buddies that we used to, we would rent a car in Jersey in the 80s and like drive to Chicago for a weekend and hit a White Sox game, Cubs game, a Tigers game, Pirates game on the way back, this kind of thing. And it was really hard to do then because it was before there was an internet. We had to like get USA Today and look at the schedule for the next month and say, hey, we could do this. And we would get a bag of bologna sandwiches and put it in the back of the car and And
Off we go.
and off we go. Exactly. So anyway, that feeling of your sports experience being tied in with being sociable has always been something for me and so many people. And of course, you reach a certain point in life that you're going to look back at certain games and think about people who are no longer with us, or have moved away, or you haven't seen in a while, or whatever. And I always think that way.
I love that. Love that. All right. Let's see here. If you had to choose one, okay, what will be your favorite fruit?
Oh, well, it's funny you say that because I just had breakfast and I crush about a quarter pound of fruit, maybe a half, every morning. But anyway, mixed fruit, but oranges without question. I am an orange fan. I like the color orange, as you said before, but I like a good orange.
I love that. Love that. Okay. Let's tie a little bit because we talked about this about pizza, but do you think that pineapple belongs on a pizza?
No. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, and I'm gonna
cheese or pepperoni. Be done with it. Let's go. Let's not complicate it.
Maybe some, maybe some ground beef, but I will acknowledge the fact that it's an unlikely good combination, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like savory and like all that, but just reflexively, I'll say, come on now. Come on now. What are we doing?
Let's not mess this up, please. Let's go.
Yeah, but if it were put in front of me, it wouldn't be my first choice, but it's not outlandish.
If I'm hungry, I'm hungry. I'm gonna eat it, but I won't. It's not something that I would pick. I'm
True.
with you there. Okay, what would be your superpower if you were to have if you were to have a choice out of superpower? What will be your superpower?
Mind reading. Imagine me sitting there, about to embark upon a logo for a baseball. It's like, all right, we've gone through 7 sets of revisions. What do you want?
What is it that you want? just say it already, so I can. I want to read your mind.
And I could actually make a logo of what that would look like. It would be like beams shooting out of my eyes, directly penetrating the chest cavity of a client.
I think that's amazing. I love it. All right, what was your go on that tangent? Like, what was your favorite superhero, or still is your favorite superhero?
I don't know. I was never a comic book kid necessarily. I really wasn't. So there really is not one, to be candid, that stands out.
I like it. I can understand that. Yeah. All right. If you were to choose between these two smells, fresh cut grass or bread baking in the oven.
Oh man, they're both great. They're both great. And tell you, just a couple of weeks ago, I'm like walking around. I live in a city now, and you don't often smell fresh cut grass. It's so nice, especially this time of year.
It is.
I'm gonna say, there is like bread baking in the oven is just
You walk by a bakery,
totally. I'm drooling, Ed. I'm thinking about, there used to be, I lived for 13 years in Hoboken, New Jersey, and there was a place called the Antique Bakery. I think it's still there. But they were baking these semolina loaves at 2 a.m. when I'm coming home from going out with my friends. And I'd stop in there and I'd get like a 50-cent loaf and just crush it,
Oh, that's amazing. That just sounds good right now. Absolutely. Right? Heck yeah. All right. Couple more and then I promise I will leave you alone, my friend. But what was the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Oh, I will admit to being not the most adventurous eater in the world. So I would really have to think about that. And if I think about it, I might have I'm not going there, because it's like, I wouldn't do that. I'm not, I admit, I am not an adventurous eater. I've got my wife telling me a story about going to Mexico City with some clients and eating ant eggs, or, I've just never been put in that position.
You're like, I'm not going to be put in that position because I'm never going to do it. Just don't even bother.
It's like, I've had like bizarre meats, a little bit. All right. I got one for you. I had a yak burger about 3 years ago.
A yak burger?
A yak burger.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How was it though?
It was a little gamey, a little bit dry. But yeah, I did have a yak burger, and it was at I'm going to give a shout out. It was at a place in Jersey City, New Jersey called Dark Side of the Moo, and they have exotic, weird meets my oldest daughter took me there for Father's Day. How's that for a good Father's Day present?
That's a
Dad, I'm
great
gonna buy you a
name.
yak burger.
Like, Dad, here we go. Happy
Yeah,
Father's Day. Here's a yak burger.
exactly.
I love it. All right. Last one here. Okay. If you could take just one thing to a deserted island, you're heading there. There's no choice. You're going. But if you could take one thing to your deserted island, what would it be?
Question, Ed, do I have Wi-Fi there?
Oh, good question. No one has asked that question. It's like, because if there's Wi-Fi, there's my phone. Here I go.
Yeah. Well, so all right. Regardless, I am a reader, and I would probably take my iPad, which already has a few hundred books stored on it, that doesn't rely upon Wi-Fi. So if you're going to say, like, are you taking a family member or your pet or something like that, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But I would probably take my iPad. It's sitting right here plugged in front of me with a few hundred books in it. And yeah, I would be able to bide the time.
Mine is plugged in right now.
Exactly. Oh, look at you. Yeah.
So,
it's a great looking notebook. No
I love it, right? I found
old
it.
School composition marble notebook.
Exactly. So
I've got a couple of them myself.
There you go. Todd, thank you so much for doing this. I've had an absolute blast. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to ask you, where can people find you on the socials, my friend?
Very easy. Instagram, Twitter, primarily. It's at Todd Radom, TODDRADOM. And that's the gateway to everything. So I cannot thank you enough, Ed. It's been a great conversation. Could have gone on for another hour. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
We will. We will certainly will. I'm going to hold you to that, my friend. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you. Great seeing you.
I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Todd. Now, make sure you guys are following him if you're not doing that already. And if you're not, why? So make sure you do that right now. Actually, just wait to the end of the episode. You hear the dad joke, and then you go and follow him. All right? Go and do that. 1,000 thanks to Todd. It was a ton of fun. I learned a lot from him, obviously, and I couldn't say nicer things about the man. So make sure you guys are following him seriously. Follow the podcast. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, Threads. I don't know. I'll probably be on the next new social media platform out there as well. So, but yeah, give it 5 stars. Give the podcast 5 stars. There you go. All right, and now for the dad joke of the episode, and here it is. What is sticky and brown? Duh, a stick. All right, I see myself out. And until then, guys, keep on grinding, and always super to minor leagues. See ya.